So, ladies and gentlemen, Patriot Street Fighters out there all over the world, I have a distinct honor today of introducing you to somebody I've followed for a long time. I find it beyond a privilege to actually get his time to be here today. Many of you know who Robert David Steele is. He comes from the intel counterintelligence community, certainly has a viewpoint on the intelligence world that few people could possibly have. And what I would say to this is that anything that we talk about today, I would take to the highest level of credibility because, and I'm going to ask Robert about this today. I watched early on where Robert didn't necessarily buy into Donald Trump. Probably had a watchful eye, a raised
Oh, no, no,
eyebrow.
wait a minute. I always bought into Donald Trump. It was QAnon I wasn't sure about.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, maybe I misread that, but that is whether it's Trump himself or the intelligence from 17. That's one of the questions I want to talk to you about, because when I find somebody of your stature in that world come to the conclusion we have a legitimacy to, and the proofs that we've had through this, I want to talk to you about what was it that became your turning point. And welcome to this show, by the way. Thanks for being here.
Well, I remember where I was when John F. Kennedy was assassinated. I was standing on Rue Pasteur in Saigon, just down from MACV. And I never really computed the JFK assassination as a deep state conspiracy until I read about 15 books on JFK and understood that CIA and Lyndon Baines Johnson and New York Money and Israel and so many others were involved in this. That was the beginning of my own awakening. And then 9/11 just absolutely blew me away. I've done an edited work on 9/11. It's at tinyurl.com/911-POTUS, P-O-T-U-S. And that's when I realized that most of our elected and appointed officials are traitors. They are blackmailed, they are bribed, or they are brainwashed. They do not represent we the people. So when Trump came along, I wrote the first article, How Trump Can Win and Counterpunch, which no longer publishes me for reasons I
I got
don't.
to tell you, I very firmly stand corrected on what I said earlier. Now, I didn't see that article. I
No,
didn't.
that's fine. But the point is, I understood that Trump was a businessman and he was unusual and he was unlike anybody else. But I also understood that the Republican Party was a bunch of treasonous sacks of crap. The Republican Party has been stabbing President Trump in the back every day from Sunday, and they're no different. I have this great picture of a vulture on top of Capitol Hill with a red wing and a blue wing, and it says "one bird, two wings, same crap." Both parties need to be eradicated. Where I found QAnon interesting was in about 2019. I started realizing that the stuff that QAnon had been posting in 2017 was starting to play out. And then I ran into people like Martin Geddes, who's written 10 great essays on QAnon.
Love
and
him.
He's now got this book, which I wrote the foreword to. This book is about evil, and it's about embedded evil. And it was partly an inspiration that drove me to make the 4 movies on Lucifer, on #unrig elections, on Wall Street treason and crime, and on satanic pedophilia, because everything is connected. And bottom line for me on Trump is I know 3 people that know Trump. Well, actually, I know more than 3 people, but I know 3 people I'll name that know Trump directly. One of them is Detective Jimmy Boots Rothstein from New York. He was the top NYPD detective for pedophilia and prostitution in the 1990s. He gives Trump a clean bill of health. Another is Mel K, who worked for Trump, calls Trump the most gracious person on the planet. And the third one I'm not going to name, but they've basically told me that Trump is one of the smartest people they have ever met. I mean, he's beyond genius. And of course, Jack Welch came out of a meeting with Trump and said, whatever they may say about this guy, talking to him is like talking to a peer. Now, this is Neutron Jack, who runs GE worldwide. He's now passed. But bottom line here is everything being said about Trump by the media and the social media is absolute bullshit. This man is a god. He's the chosen one. And he is, I think, going to come back.
I believe that too. And one of the things that's kind of parallel to what you're saying about Trump, is everything about Trump is completely counter, as we know, by the mainstream media's projection of him. And I was on a show last night, the live stream, and I said, let me explain something to you, because I'm going to have an interview somebody. Mike King wrote a book on World War II and all the things that you likely know, all the lies perpetuated throughout history. And something came up about Hitler. And I said, well, let me just explain something to you. The realities we may be learning about our past. Imagine what they've done to Donald Trump here. You've seen what they've done to him. You've seen the blatant lies. Now, if you run into the truest the most existential threat, the Khazarian mafia, the cabal, call them what you want, and you have a guy like this that is their greatest threat, you're not going to just beat him. You got to destroy him. You got to wipe out his genetic chain, because you don't want that coming back 200 years later. What do you think they're going to say if they won this, which they won't? What do you think they're going to say about this guy, Donald Trump, in the history books moving forward? He's going to be the most evil person that the world has ever known, surpassing Hitler. So based on the fact they've shown us this reality of who they really are, what do we now have to ask about our past, our World War II, World War I, all the things that we've come to believe through the history books? And that's something, I don't know if you want to touch on that.
Oh,
but
sure. Listen, I'm glad to touch on that. Let me tell you that I'm still hoping to get an open source agency. CIA has fought me on this for 30 years, but the Office of Management and Budget has approved it twice at $2 billion a year. And if I don't go back into government and create the open source agency, I've got 2 billionaires and 3 multimillionaires, multimillionaires, who are talking to me about funding Web 3.0, which would be uncensorable. And in fact, the biggest new idea that we've had is the whole idea of county level internet and county level cybercoin. So for example, imagine a county that prints its own money, its own cybercoin, and that coin appreciates in value when it's spent locally, and it loses value as it moves further away. There's just some extraordinary stuff that's starting to happen, including dark fiber combined with Bluetooth mesh networks, which are non-harmful, which 5G is very harmful. So if I get an open source agency, or if I get Web 3.0, there will be a history division, and that history division will be responsible for rewriting history all the way back to day zero, and certainly including World War II, including all the genocides that have not been recorded. In my second book, The New Craft of Intelligence, I had a chapter by Dr. Greg Stanton on all the genocides that the Zionists ignore. And in fact, the genocide in World War II was actually not really a genocide. It was people dying from starvation, typhus, and Allied bombing. And then nobody wants to talk about the fact that we murdered 11 million Germans after they surrendered. Okay, so history does indeed, John Lewis Gaddis wrote a great book called The Landscape of History, in which he said, history is a denied area right now. And I'm huge on truth and reconciliation. My motto, which is well known, is the truth at any cost lowers all other costs. And if you don't get history right, you're going to mess up the future. So I'm very excited about the idea. And that's the other thing, is collective intelligence. Tom Atlee has tutored me from the Co-Intelligence Institute. He's tutored me over the last 10 or 15 years. And my greatest soundbite when I started fighting CIA in the 1980s was, don't send a spy where a schoolboy can go. CIA does not like schoolboys because they're cheap and they're zero political risk, and they tell the truth. CIA has become a place that does rendition and torture and drone assassination, regime change, and election fraud, including American election fraud. And again, I have to stress, 90% of the people at CIA are good people trapped in a bad system. But the bottom line here is, I think we're at a breakout moment. I think that QAnon has been part of the engine for a great awakening. And all of the drama that we're looking at right now, with the tip of the hat to Matt Taibbi, is a WrestleMania drama. These people are probably already have signed confessions. They're playing out a script. And what we're working on right now is the 30% that really did vote for Biden, most of whom now have buyer's remorse. And I don't know what's going to happen the 1st through the 7th of March, but the cost of a room at the Trump Hotel, where I've been several times to meet key people, is 4 times the normal rate for the week of 1 through 7 March.
That was pointed out to me a week ago. And one thing I've been pretty good at in my predictions of anything coming is that I never landed on any date on anything. So I kind of stand neutral on that. I remember November 3rd was zero barrier for many people, then December 14th, and January 6th, and January 20th, and the whole way through it. I'm like folks, listen, stop thinking there's going to be a political solution here. It's a military one. And whatever's going to happen, and I've said many times, I have no idea. I'm just watching this thing with fascination. I just know what the outcome is going to be. Now, if I was going to, I probably still would make that bold leap because I don't like to back.
You're ahead of the pack for not picking a date. In fact, I lost $1,000 to my oldest son by betting that Biden would not be inaugurated. And hey. I was having dinner with Juan Osavin, not his real name, and he said, "Robert, I told you it's gonna run out to April. Don't be making bets like that." So I lost $1,000, but I think we'll win the war. I also think that in addition to the military doing the right thing, it's going to be a cultural win. There is a massive uprising of decent Americans who believe in faith, family, small farms, and freedom, the 4 Fs. And I think we're going to see a total turnaround in the United States of America. And all these people pushing transgenderism and open borders and multiculturalism and no standards. I mean, in California now, apparently Black people don't have to take final exams. At the same time that Californians insisting that children be taught to roll around with drag queens to show their tolerance for perversion. Okay, this is not America. And I think we're reaching the end of the road. We're hitting bottom at a cultural level. And I think the heartland has had it. And those of us that live in places like Virginia that are now controlled by carpetbaggers and snowflakes, we're starting to push back. And I think we're going to see a very, very positive change. As President Trump has said, the best is yet to come.
You know, I believe that. And what I respect about your entire existence, your career, when you come out of the agency, everything you've done is you have been the truth hammer. And you've done it before it was cool, it was acceptable. You throttled the world with the truth as you know it, when most people don't. Few people have the courage to do it. You know, I've considered that show I started at Tipping Point on Revolution Radio to be this full throttle truth hammer. It's a little different now because people actually, they're ready to hear it. You know, when I went down the pathway of this Bolshevik Khazarian mafia outpost in Israel that's basically doing exactly what you've been saying here in the United States for year after year after year. I knew it was a big risk. I knew I was going to alienate some of my Jewish friends who I love.
Scott, the way to thread this needle is to distinguish, as I have been careful to distinguish, between Zionism and Judaism. Mm-hmm. Most Jews in Israel want the government of Israel gone. They know that Benjamin Netanyahu is a pissant furniture salesman. And he's a nothing. Palestine needs to be restored to the Palestinians. At the same time, most Jews in the United States of America, and many rabbis, but not all, now understand that 12 Zionist billionaires have been funding child trafficking and child torture, and they funded 9/11. All of that, we know all of that. I mean, the single best thing I've done in the last year or so is got Bill Binney to say on a show with Michelle Holiday, what is true. We have it all. We have every email, every text, every game chat, and every banking transaction, including all of the offshore banking transactions. We haven't processed it all, but we have it all. And so these people in big tech and Wall Street, treason and crime, the satanic pedophiles, the blackmailers, the judges and prosecutors and police chiefs, the governors, the state legislators that have all sold out, we have it all. So what we're about to begin, I think, is a cleanup period that will last several years. But at the end of the day, I think what President Trump and the people around him have pulled off is the single least violent, least troubling counter-revolution in modern history. This has been a truth and reconciliation program with no bloodshed, and that is a great accomplishment.
Yeah, it's truly astonishing. And I think people don't even, what makes it more astonishing is them playing this thing out exactly like it's playing out right now versus a Trump open inauguration. Point I want to ask you about is this, and this is what I found very troubling in Gordon Duff's work on this Khazarian mafia. He said very distinctly, he said the genetic analysis that they have actually done is that the only 3%, and this may be a bold question, we may be able to answer it or not, but only 3% of the Jewish people even have ancient Hebrew DNA, but 80% of the Palestinians have the ancient Hebrew DNA.
No, and I think that's absolutely correct. And
Yeah.
I mean, Gordon has warts. For example, he thinks Hillary Clinton is a good person. But he's got some extraordinary contacts, and I pay attention to Gordon the way I pay attention to Ben Fulford. I live by the 80-20 rule, the 70-30 rule. All of these guys, including particularly Gordon Duff, have some extraordinary things to offer, but you also have to filter out the crap. Preston James has written some very good stuff on how the Khazars were satanic pedophiles and were expelled. They were put down by both Russia and Persia. And Israel was essentially hijacked at the point of a gun. And what people don't realize is that the United Kingdom is the main enemy of the United States of America, not China, not Iran, not Russia. And when I say United Kingdom, I'm speaking about the House of Lords, the Queen, the Rothschilds, the City of London, MI6, MI5. I mean, MI6 committed acts of war against the United States of America, seeking to stop Donald Trump from becoming president. And after he became president, MI6 continued in these attacks on President Trump. Now, one of the things I've done with Bill Binney and others is I pointed out that NSA has all of the CIA Green Line calls, the encrypted phone calls between Brennan and Gina Haspel and Brennan and MI6 and Brennan and James Comey and Rothenstein and these other guys. All of those encrypted phone calls, NSA has them in the clear because NSA is the one who manages CIA crypto. Okay, you're frozen, Scott. Are you still there?
Right now, maybe you'll unfreeze. Okay, we're back.
Could you hear any of that about the Green Line crypto?
Right up until you came up to Brennan and the NSA has all those Green Line contacts.
So basically, we have all the evidence we need to hang John Brennan and Rosenstein, and we have all the evidence we need to close the United Kingdom embassy and declare all of them persona non grata. Now, I don't think it's going to come to that, because I think we will do a truth and reconciliation thing. But people need to understand that the United States has been occupied by two parasites, one British and one Zionist. And that has nothing to do with the Jewish people who have just been befuddled and have gone along and been treated as Sayonim, as camp followers and collaborators.
Well, now we see, Robert, we see that what appears to be Buckingham Palace is vacated. It's empty. There's all these indicators that this takedown obviously has been underway. It's global. And you mentioned Brennan and you mentioned Gina Haspel. You know, we understand that these people have been dealt with, at least Haspel has been dealt with. Are these people removed from the playing field? I mean, and they're going to roll out this information at some point later, tribunals that have already happened. Where do you stand on all these tribunals?
I honestly don't know. I can tell you that Sidney Powell and I used to do emails regularly. I got to know her when I wrote a rave review on her book, License to Lie. But she's gone dark. Mike Flynn is still active. Lynn Wood is very active. Juan Ossoven and Patrick Byrne are very active. And then there's some people that you don't see that are very, very active. My best guess is that some of these people have already died. Some of these people have been told that they will get a get out of jail free pass if they get out of the way. And some of these people are still to be dealt with. Now, my personal feeling is that Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi and Maxine Waters and Alexandria Cortez and people like Richard Shelby, okay? Richard Shelby is the guy, together with Senator Dodd, who made Wall Street treason and crime fashionable, and who took jail off the table for them, along with Eric Holder, who did the Holder Memorandum. So my bottom line gut sense is that every single one of these people knows that they have, on the one hand, a possibility of making the deal and receiving mercy, or dying at the hands of a battalion of Army Rangers with fixed bayonets.
So now that we know that those are plausible options, how do you think the public's going to handle? Like, say some of these people get a free pass. We know from 17 that these people are not going to be able to walk down the street for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, well, Scott, you raise a really, really good question, because one of the things I pointed out to people is that Nancy Pelosi, for example, does not fear financial fines, or even going to jail. What she fears is being torn apart limb from limb by her constituents. And there's two big things hanging over Nancy Pelosi's head, and one of them is satanic pedophilia. Okay, the other one is treason. And I do think special ops grabbed Nancy Pelosi's laptop when I think this whole Capitol thing was a false flag with variations. So Antifa was walked through the Capitol in a military walkthrough planning session the day beforehand. They may already have been inside the Capitol on the day of the event. Then you had all the Trumpers coming in who were doing their People's Town Square stuff, and they were actually trying to stop Antifa from breaking shit. And then you had a special operations cell, including the woman that faked her death. If you look at that video carefully, you know, the backpack goes up, the head's protected as she falls down. The bloodshed is completely crisis actor stuff. So as best I can tell, all of this has been handled. Now, the other thing is supercomputers. Juan and I have talked about how there's move and counter move, and a lot of this stuff has been gamed out by supercomputer for the last several years. And there are at least two supercomputers that are dueling, and there may be a third one. Jim Turner, who was Ralph Nader's number two, says he thinks there's a third Chinese supercomputer that's throwing curveballs. And I don't know anything about all of this stuff, but I will tell you this. I am enormously pleased that there has been no violence from right of center. And I absolutely believe in my heart that Biden and Kamala Harris and Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and all these other people, whom I believe, subject to proper investigation, indictment, and conviction, are in fact traitors. I think we're moving in the right direction. And what particularly pleases me is that it's bloodless, with a few exceptions. Now, you make a good point. People want heads. I think the important point, which I've made from the beginning, and I mean, from the first time I said this on Hagmann and Hagmann, I have always said truth and reconciliation and getting these people out of the way is more important than bloodletting. Okay? You never back the jackal into a corner. You need to give them an exit strategy. And that's why I've always been huge on truth and reconciliation. I'm certainly not going to second guess the president. And when I say the president, I'm speaking of Donald Trump. He was legally elected, and he should be rightfully restored, if not by March, then by April. Justice Roberts, an alleged pedophile, according to Lin Wood, and also according to Joaquim Hagopian, whose books I'm publishing. Let me take a moment, Scott.
Yeah, great. I want my people to see this. I want them to start dialing into your work.
Nobody
Joaquim
else on the planet is at the intersection of election reform, Wall Street treason and crime, satanic pedophilia, and now taking down the big tech. Now, I'm a very humble person with no money and no influence, but intellectually and morally, I am ground zero for those four battles.
I love it, man.
In support of President Trump and the people like him. And that's why I decided to do the 4 movies. And I was not able to meet my original deadline of 1 March for all 4 movies, because I tried to get Patrick Byrne to fund these movies 4 months ago. It just didn't work out. But what I've been able to do is get 4 movies launched. And the 4th movie, on Lucifer and His Cult, is actually an extended trailer. So what we're doing is we've got 3 movies where we're doing at least 12 interviews each. And those 12 interviews are being loaded raw before the 1st of March. And so we've done Kathy O'Brien, Joaquim Hagopian, a couple of others, and Cynthia McKinney's about to interview Patrick Bryan, Juan Savin, and Mike Flynn, and hopefully Lin Wood and Sidney Powell. And I'm doing more interviews on Wall Street, which I've done before. And now the 4th movie is going to be led by Sasha Stone. It's going to be a conversation among the 4 directors, and each of us will bring 1 person. So I'll probably bring Wes Christian on Wall Street Crime. Sean Stone will bring Joaquim Hagopian. Cynthia McKinney will bring somebody who's been actively involved in the forensics of the election fraud machines. I'd love to have Sidney Powell, but we'll see. And that conversation is going to be a 60 to 90 minute overview for all Americans on how election fraud is how you get a treasonous Congress, which is what makes possible treasonous criminal Wall Street activity. And let me point out, President Trump is in a very strong position on Wall Street because Wall Street has been documented as having stolen $100 trillion over the last 15 to 20 years from widows and orphans and pension funds with naked short selling. They've also, and this is less well documented, but if NSA stuff is processed, it will be documented. Wall Street has also laundered $100 trillion in illicit funds from trafficking in children and drugs and guns and gold and so forth. What this means, Scott, is that $200 trillion in illicit wealth is immediately confiscatable through civil and criminal forfeiture with a judgment rather than a trial. Now, I've told President Trump, and my memos at tinyurl.com/POTUS-6, and this has reached President Trump. He's able to confiscate half of that without a problem. So he can go to the partners of Wall Street, of Goldman Sachs, Merrill Lynch, JP Morgan, Citadel, all these people who have been stealing money for the last 20 years. He can go to all of them and say, Bubbas, you got a choice. You can turn $100 trillion in wealth back into the Treasury for me to redistribute to the public and make America great again and cover all the pension funds and debt jubilee, the whole 9 yards. Or I can put a battalion of Rangers with fixed bayonets up your ass, and you are going to lose your waterfront mansions, your private jets, your private islands, your yachts, your collections of Picassos, your condos in Paris, London, Chicago, and San Francisco, your collections of gold bars and jewels, all of it. We could take it all away. The beautiful thing about all of this is every one of these assholes is executable.
I'd love, and I know a lot of people would love to see option B, certainly. I'll make a prediction here. Because Hollywood is all but dead, what they've produced, the content is horrific. I've talked about in the past, back in 2012, I kind of got connected to Napoleon Hill's Outwitting the Devil, hidden manuscript. We put together, an investment group. We got the screenplay funded, written. It's ready to go. It's now part of a $200 million capital raise on a studio project.
Whoa,
that is going to
congratulations.
Yeah. So, and I have nothing to do with that part of the capital raise, but this is from these humanitarian funds that are going to start financing the distribution worldwide of content that raises human consciousness. But in this this project had to be vetted through DoD, NSA, etc. So there are various departments in this operation. And as soon as that funding hits, and it's off to the races. But
hold on, let me go back, and I want to emphasize something you said, because I think you really are hitting on something hugely, hugely important, which is funding available for raising human consciousness.
Yeah.
I think you've just touched on one of the single most important changes in the past couple of years that have resulted from Trump's inspiring the Great Awakening.
And that's the most exciting thing I think we have in front of us. I talk about this oftentimes on our show, that we have this unbelievably bright future for a number of reasons. One of them specifically is that these massive funds that have been parked on the sidelines for humanity to rescue and salvage humanity from this evil power structure that'll be available will flow into any type of projects, media or otherwise, to where people are doing good, helping rescue humanity, even the animals or anything, the earth itself. But my prediction is this. Is based on what these movies that you're producing and these other things, and
$30,000 per movie, except for the pedophilia one, which is $60,000. God bless Zoom, because Zoom is what's making it possible.
Well, I predict that this kind of content in this broadcast medium that is there for the reason to help rescue humanity is going to be the entertainment of the future. In fact, you may be seeing this yourself, but this weekend, Jim Caviezel is going to be showcasing, premiering his film that I guess Mel Gibson just finished the edits on in Las Vegas.
Las Vegas, yeah. I couldn't
see that?
go, but Cynthia McKinney will be there. And a whole bunch of rich people are there. And what I've been told is that my pedophilia movie, because the movie that's being premiered in Las Vegas is great, but it's on the margins. And the reason it's on the margins is because it's focused on a single Christian rescue organization. And it's not focused on the fact that the U.S. Federal government, the state governments, and the local governments are all complicit in child trafficking as a routine event. And I will tell you, I've said this before, there's a pedophile on every block and a kill room every 10 blocks across this country.
Well, I tell you what, the high side of what we'll see this weekend is that that's going to open a door because I just happened to, I don't know if I read it or I was told
No,
that even more,
you're right, and I
yeah,
support this movie, and I've
yeah.
advertised this movie on my website. But what I was told was that, unbeknownst to me, the four movies I'm doing have Mega Millions counterparts being planned for a year down the road.
And that's great. It's kind of like, people are waking up slowly and introducing them to the horrors of what they're likely going to see from something like this. It shocks the consciousness that they have to know more. They have to have some validation points. Coming right up on the heels of that kind of content is the stuff that you're willing to do, the real hard, deep behind enemy lines, behind the Wizard of Oz curtain, to show people, regardless of what you think in this world we consider United States as utopia, this is the truth. Here's the curtain. There's the wizard. This is what these animals, these horrible scumbags are doing to humanity right underneath our noses.
There's only
And
one word you've used that I would change, which is, you said entertainment. I think it's going to be education.
well,
And
yeah, how to perhaps it's a replacement. The education medium is going to be the replacement of entertainment. Because
I
quite
agree.
honestly,
And
entertainment is
I want you to know
entertainment.
I've had this conversation with General Mike Flynn, whom I really totally respect. And I think he's vastly more, he's special. And I don't think people understand that while he was under the burden of being framed by the FBI and the Department of Justice and so forth, he was in fact being a guerrilla commander for what will go down in history as the greatest information operation in modern times. But one of the things we've talked about is that we need to re-educate America. We need to purge the universities
Mhm.
of these leftist snowflake assholes. We need to completely redo the curriculums in the high schools to restore civics and art and music and physical training. We've also talked about universal service. Okay, this has become a fat, stupid country in which everybody is isolated from one another. So my vision of universal service is that everybody goes in, including, I'm going to use two trigger words, the retards and the crippled. Everybody goes
Yeah,
to
look,
universal service.
yeah,
Okay.
we can all serve on every level.
Yes. And I will tell you, I'm both a retard and disabled in my own way. So fuck anybody that can't handle that word. So
Right.
the idea here is universal service, kind of like a boot camp as a bonding experience. And then everybody gets to choose 4 years as an officer, 2 years enlisted, but 5 different choices: armed forces, Peace Corps, first responders, cyber, or family farms.
I love it.
And everybody
love
is
it.
fully funded in their first 5 years, or whatever. Anyway, I think we're going to see some amazing things come down the road. But what I'm committed to is the reinvention of education, intelligence, and research. DARPA and NIH and others are spending trillions of dollars on how to fuck people up instead
Mhm.
of how to heal people and lift them up.
I'll
And
tell you.
I've proposed, in fact, one of my most popular, and my single most popular publication at Amazon is called Eyes Only. And it's my vision for the future of America. And that includes restructuring the White House. We throw the press out. That becomes a war room for the president. And then we have 3 deputy vice presidents: a deputy vice president for the Commonwealth, a deputy vice president for global engagement, which covers defense, commerce, diplomacy, and development, and then a deputy vice president for education, intelligence, and research, to create a smart nation in which every citizen is informed and engaged, and their voice and their vote count, and every citizen is eligible. I'll tell you, I'm very proud of what Cynthia McKinney and I have done. I just want to show you one last thing here. This is available free at unrig.net. Okay, so McKinney and I have created a 12-point program for election reform. And here's my bottom line: I want to destroy the Republican and Democratic parties.
Bingo.
And in
Bingo.
2022, here's the winner, Scott. This is the money line. In 2022, I want independents, libertarians, Sandinistas, the populists of the left, Trumpers, the populists of the right, and the little people, Greens, Justice Party, working families, whatever. I want Congress to be proportionally representative of 100% of all Americans. And here's the bottom line. No one party can control either the Senate or the House.
I love it. I'll tell you, I believe that going back to what you just said, the nuclear family is the protective front in this country, always has been, from foreign invasion. The ideas that you just discussed here a minute ago would be the protective front for invasion by the criminal element inside the wire, inside the United States of America, inside the political
Let me
and
give you the
corporate class.
second. Let me give you the
100%.
second layer. Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association. The Washington Post is now doing a full court press trying to defame and interfere with the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association because we have scared the crap out of the deep state. Sheriff Brad Rogers is now world famous for saying that sheriffs can and must defend their citizens, county by county, against federal, state, and local officials who are violating the Constitution and encroaching. And I'll just give you two examples. Sheriff Brad Rogers was called by an Amish farmer who was being abused by the Federal Drug Administration. And they were trying to basically fuck this farmer up. And they were saying, we're going to have you in a grand jury. We don't think you're doing healthy farming and all of that. The sheriff sent one email saying, listen, motherfuckers, you come into my county, I'm going to arrest you.
Great.
Next week, the Amish farmer got a letter of apology and a complete close down.
Shit, I love it.
Okay, now here's the second example. Sheriff Richard Mack, who founded CSPOA. A bridge washed out that was absolutely vital for farmers on one side to get kids to schools on the other side. And the Army Corps of Engineers, and I don't know who it was, Department of Interior, they said, we'll get to it in our own good time. And these guys said, no, we're going to repair it now. And Army Corps of Engineers and everybody said, we're going to put you in jail. You can't touch that. We own this waterway, you know, whatever. Sheriff Richard Mack says, fuck you. We're building the bridge. And if you show up again, I'm going to arrest your ass.
I love it.
And guess what? The fuckers back down.
And you know what? You just made the point that I make all the time. A side point. People don't realize that the sheriffs in the United States have incredible power. And you just proved it right there. And if the sheriffs all step up, this bullshit ends a lot faster. The second thing.
Wait, Scott, let me give you the best part. This is not an official deputized thing, but the sheriffs can deputize all of their armed citizens.
I want one.
Just like, well, join CSPOA.org. Just like we deputized 2,000 National Guardsmen as deputy U.S. Marshals here in Washington, D.C. 5,000 are remaining behind. I guarantee you 5,000 National Guards are not remaining behind to protect Washington from demonstrators. They're remaining behind because Amazing Polly has correctly said this is the world's largest open-air prison camp. I think we're at a good path. But when a sheriff can deputize armed citizens, and when pastors and doctors and lawyers at the county level come together and say, we're not putting up with this bullshit anymore, now you can start holding your county boards of supervisors and governors and others accountable. For example, here in Fairfax County, they are pressing for transgender education and basically teaching kids how to be perverted. They are forbidding the use of the open carry of guns in nature reserves where bears threatening the families have been seen in the past year. They are desecrating Confederate memorials. And now they've just been found guilty of massive voter fraud in favor of Biden. The forensics are in. Fairfax County is a fucking cesspool of corruption. And it's time. And part of the problem is that's how most of the citizens around me want it, because they're carpetbaggers and snowflakes. This is big tech country. So I'm seriously thinking about moving to Martin County in Florida in May. But I think over time, I think we're going to push back here, and Virginia will be restored to sanity and to the Constitution. But the sheriffs are vital. And this is why I've come to the conclusion that county level citizen organization is the next big step.
Well, that's great, and I'm glad my listeners got to hear that. And I'm gonna try to pin you down for a few more minutes. I know you're extremely busy with all these
Well, I
12
will
hours a
do
day,
what you
7 days
want
a
here.
week. But two things I want to talk or just mention, following up what you said. And I've said this to my listeners. I've pounded it into their head for months. If these people, if we understand as a society that we massively outnumber these bastards, we have the numbers that this fraction, micro fraction in any region has no power. When we stand up collectively and say, enough of this bullshit, we're done. Just like you pointed out with the sheriffs, when they send a letter to these all powerful agencies, what do they do every time? They back the hell down. They're chicken shit cowards. They don't want to face the wrath of the people, because the people in the community is going to back their sheriff more than they're going to back some federal agent that comes in here. Um, so bravo to you on that. The other point or question I want to ask you is, I was listening to Simon this morning. When I usually brush my teeth or shave, I throw something up, and that was the first thing up. And I was listening to him talk about that he believes that there is going to be this sort of secondary movement in the ultimate exposure and takedown of this cabal and reveal what's really happened. And he said it's going to happen. It's likely going to happen this way. These lower courts are going to be, now as they are, Trump's won 66% of these voter fraud
The
cases
ones
thus
that are
far, as
heard
I've
on the
heard.
merits, not the ones
Yeah,
that have
on
been
merits. Yeah,
through corruption.
and he said that, these lower level courts, it's going to work through the process to expose this. And the reason that the military doesn't want to come in, or even Trump, and remove Biden and the other clown openly, because they don't want history to ever look back this way. They want it to a point, and I didn't think there was a political solution. There may be a judicial one here, but his point is that there will be enough exposure through these lower courts that anywhere where there are blockades by these deep state judges, it'll be so evident now to the public, then the public's going to say, you know what? This is bullshit. And then at that point, the military say, okay, it's now evident to everybody that this is real, this was stolen, and we have now got to take action to protect the Constitution. That was his viewpoint this morning. What do you think of that?
Well, first off, I think that the military has been waffling, and there's at least, Juan and I have talked about this, at least 1/3 of our generals are chicken shits. Now, you need to know that most flag officers are colonels that have won a beauty contest and agreed to suck big time above them. All right. A brigadier general is like a private first class in the General Officer Corps. And a lot of these generals have always been about their second career and getting a cushy job in the military industrial complex. And when I dealt with over 64 flag officers, and I would say 4 of them were worthwhile. The rest of them were nothing. And they always said, oh, well, we have to obey the civilian chain of command or resign. That's bullshit. They swear an oath to defend the Constitution against all enemies, domestic and foreign. And I hope President Trump signed the Insurrection Act, because the Insurrection Act is designed for when the civilian legal system completely breaks down. And that's what we've seen. Now, Justice Roberts is walking the plank on the 19th of February. If Justice Roberts does not get his alleged pedophile head out of his ass on the 19th of February, he could well be headed for Guantanamo. This is a serious, serious situation. And on the 19th, the Supreme Court decides whether or not to hear 3 or 4 Trump cases. If it does, it can hear them quickly the week of the 22nd of February. And this could be referred back to Congress for a revote. And then hopefully Congress, which I think is now very much under the gun, would say, okay, oh my God, we had no idea. We were wrong. President Trump is in fact the legally elected president, and so forth. And I'm also looking for Trump to transition. I'm seeing some weak signals, most of them from Chinese elders and from others, that once Trump is established in his second term, he may end up making someone vice president who is a middle of the road person, and then Trump will announce that he's going to resign in order to take Trump derangement syndrome off the table. And this middle of the road person will then finish out the term and then run for president in 2024. And if we combine that with Dr. McKinney and I and our election reform program, then Congress in 2022 will be completely honest, making evidence-based decisions in the public interest. Cynthia and I are talking about a road tour 50 states in 50 days in June and July, basically demanding that everybody, asking that everybody demand the Election Reform Act of 2021, which has 12 points. And it includes instant runoff, paper ballots counted publicly on site. I mean, the electronic machines were designed for fraud. And everybody knows that. So it's a very interesting time. On balance, I'm positive about the future.
Well, two real quick questions, and then I'll let you exit.
Thank you.
I'm gonna steal every minute of you that I can.
This has been a good conversation. You've managed me very well.
I appreciate that. So what I would ask is one name. Who would be this middle of the road person that crosses your mind?
I actually checked and asked, and I was asked not to say.
Okay.
So I'm not going to.
All right.
What's your second question?
Okay. Second question is, or I should say a statement I'd like you to make for the listeners, our listeners out there, Robert, that don't know the significance of February 19th. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, the Supreme Court has agreed to conference on 3 or 4 cases of election fraud that the Trump people have brought forward. And I think that means they're going to conference on whether they accept those cases or not. Now, the Supreme Court, I think, made a mistake in rejecting. It didn't actually make a mistake. It rejected the Texas lawsuit, which had 19 other states. I mean, 20 states of the union said we've been screwed by these 6 other states, and the Supreme Court should have taken that case and then canceled the Electoral College vote and referred it to Congress. However, who knows? I don't know what the president knows. I don't know what all these other people know. Bottom line is that everybody who voted in favor of the Electoral College vote in Congress is a traitor, without question. And that includes all those Republicans led by Mitt Romney and Liz Cheney and so forth. So we've really, Trump in the 1990s said he'd love to get to a point where everybody thought he was down and out so he could see who was really still with him.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, you and I and Mike Flynn and Sidney Powell, Cynthia McKinney, the black woman from Georgia.
Yeah.
They
Incredible.
Invented electronic machines to run her out of office. She was one of the first to be cheated out of office by electronic voting machines in Georgia. And she's on record as saying that Trump won big, won black, and won Georgia. And we all know that. So I think the 19th of February is a key date in American history, and God help Chief Justice Roberts if he does not come through on this.
What do you think? We know how important the reshaping of the courts were, the Supreme Court specifically. Knowing how these guys have multiple contingency after contingency in this operation for whatever happens, because we know this whole thing has to look completely organic for 2 reasons. Because the people have to see this flow with a natural course of life and living. So it doesn't look like there were bold moves made. It has to evolve on its own. So that's why I believe that the Intel operation has contingencies for every single thing with no way out of it. The second thing is, based on that, where does the Supreme Court justices that Trump brought in, where is it that they deliver? There's a reason why he brought these people in. Could they be deep staters, or do they actually deliver somewhere?
Look, part of the problem is very nuanced. For example, I was always skeptical. First off, I love Alito and I love Clarence Thomas. I'm skeptical about everybody else. Okay. And
Likewise.
If you look at Barrett is almost as weird as Roberts. Okay. I'm highly suspicious of people who have the perfect adopted multiracial family. Okay. Barrett was Scalia's clerk. Scalia was dirty. Scalia was the number one. He was the number 1 pedophile protector in the United States of America.
You're kidding. He's a Jesuit, right?
Yes.
Shit.
He was the Vatican's man on the Supreme Court.
Holy shit. When I found out he was a Jesuit, I'm like,
no, it's more than that. Scalia, look, the whole judicial system has been compromised in multiple levels. And let me make this my final comment, subject to your agreeing. Every institution that starts out protecting children ends up being run by pedophiles. So the Boy Scouts, Oxfam, UNICEF, all of these child protective services, they all end up being run by pedophiles. And the reason there's anonymity in the adoption process is not to protect the child. It's to protect the pedophiles adopting the children and paying off the Child Protective Services people who are selling the children. And in fact, the children are being kidnapped from their parents because now Child Protective Services earns a bounty on ripping a kid out of a home that might have, maybe a little extra dirt, or one of the parents is a drunk or whatever. The bottom line is the whole system is corrupt. Now, I talk about multiple chains of command, all right? The Pentagon controls the courts by having reserve officers from the JAG Corps in every single court system. The CIA controls the courts by having bribed and blackmailed people in every court system, similarly the FBI. The Mossad, MI6, MI5, they're all over everything, okay? And then you've got satanic pedophilia as the glue that holds it all together, all right? Jeffrey Epstein, I mean, for me, I started funding this 5-book series, and let me just point out that the 5th book is about to come out in February. All of this is free online at pedoempire.org, and we've got a tag cloud. You can look up the names of the people. You'll see Justice Roberts in the tag cloud. You'll see Mike Pence in the tag cloud. So pedoempire.org is a wake-up call, as well as stopnakedshortselling.org. I think we're on the verge of having a national revolution. And let me end by saying that I think at the end of the day, the two military heroes are going to be Mike Flynn and Admiral Mike Rogers.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Where is Rogers today?
I don't know, but I'm hoping that I have a chance to work with him in the future, because that's the man who weaponized NSA against the deep state in the same way that the deep state weaponized the CIA and the FBI against President Trump.
Do you think that Donald Trump has been in play for this mission for decades? Do you think this is a very, very long-term plan?
Scott, it's a really good question. I think the relationship between Trump and JFK Jr. was very important. I also believe that Trump's a Presbyterian. He's a Norman Vincent Peale prosperity gospel kind of guy, which is why Paula White gets to hang out with him. Trump is very acutely conscious of how the Zionist crime network works. And people need to understand that the Zionist criminal network is more Russian than it is Israeli or American.
Isn't Israel a Bolshevik outpost, basically?
Well, it's also called the Red Mafia, okay?
Right.
Because basically what happened was, apart from the gnomes in Switzerland allowing hundreds of thousands of Jews to die in Germany because they weren't willing to accept. Hitler was willing to let all Jews out of Germany for $3 million. And the gnomes in Switzerland refused to do that. They said their exact words were, "We need for Jews to die in order to create the homeland." And the homeland is nothing more than an aircraft carrier for crime. Okay. They just wanted a state they could control to do state-sponsored terrorism and genocide and software penetrations. The Israelis, I mean, I have a lot of respect for the Israelis in the intellectual sense, not the moral sense. But they're masters, okay? With Promise in the 1980s, and then more recently, the Department of Homeland Security is now a wholly owned subsidiary of Israel and the United Kingdom.
100%.
They've got all the law enforcement computers penetrated. They've got all the national intelligence computers penetrated. So there's a lot of cleaning up to do. And I guess I would just say that Admiral Rogers brought to President Trump and the people who want to clean America up, he brought them the golden key. We have it all.
And that's the kill shot. That's the kill shot.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, these people, they even know they're in the kill box. They know it. They feel it. They see it. They know it. I think what happens next is they're going to make some pretty bold moves to try to save something that's not salvageable. And whether it's some wild false flag or whatever, a move on Trump, I don't know what it is, but I say we can expect something like that. Is their Hail Mary of survival.
Well, I think they keep doing Hail Marys. I mean, supposedly a bullet was shot at Trump from a helicopter or a drone, and the blast stopped it. They've tried to poison the First Lady twice. They were considering a radiological attack on Las Vegas. I mean, there's lots of stuff here, but look, completely apart from the back and forth at the human physical kinetic level, I'm not a kumbaya tree-hugging cosmic hummer, but what I'm seeing is a whole bunch of spiritual and even stellar civilization stuff that is moving in the right direction.
I'm glad you said that. because that's one of the disclosure discomforts that Americans, the world, is actually going to have to come to grips with. But I like you, I think the rise of human consciousness is evident now. It's evident to many people who never even talk about it. Or I say this, coming from kind of a more of a country, small town, rougher upbringing. You got your buddies now say, "Hey, love you, bro. Yeah, love you, man." That stuff never happened 10, 20 years ago. You never talk like that. But now there's that element of humanity that's starting to rise among everybody. And when you talk about the stellar influence, again, a lot of people think that that those things aren't plausible. But if you haven't gone down that rabbit hole deep enough, then you're just missing a key
Scott,
part of what's coming.
let me make a pitch for my free blog, phi-beta-iota.net. It's like Phi Beta Capita, so PHI, phi-beta-iota.net. It's completely free. And if you go into it, you can search for ET or UFO or mind control or COVID-19 or vaccine or 5G. I mean, I'm the only guy that that has reviewed over 2,000 nonfiction books in summary form across 98 categories, who's been a spy, who created the Marine Corps intelligence activity, who is doing movies and websites and stuff like that. I mean, there are a lot of people out there that are kind of like pundits, and I respect Charlie Ward and Simon and so forth, but they don't have my background. They don't have my websites. They don't have my substance. And I am absolutely committed to the truth at any cost, lowering all other costs. And I think President Trump gets it.
Well, I'll tell you, I've, with great affection, I kind of frame people that I really like in a certain way. And like with Charlie Ward, when I was with him first time, I said, because Charlie, he always has this big jolly smile on his face. And I said, I kind of, you remind me, you're the smiling Santa who just sits there with a smile on his face, leaning back, but you got an AR-15 right across your lap. He just laughed about it. And to me, Robert David Steele is, and people of our generation would understand this, Robert David Steele is, to me, truly Encyclopedia Brown, who grew up and became a spy. All the shit that all the things that you have, I'm like, wow. Yeah, it's a good thing I don't live in the Fairfax County, which is.
But let me tell you, I'm a recovering spy.
Yeah, recovering spy.
Because I'll tell you what I learned. I mean, when I was a clandestine case officer, I mean, I peed perfume. Okay, to use a Russian phrase, I was a god. I had 5 times the regional recruiting average across my entire division. I was doing some really, really interesting shit, and. But when I left and I created the Marine Corps intelligence activity, I started to need intelligence on Burundi, Haiti, Somalia, Yemen. And that's when I discovered spies don't know jack shit about 95% of the world.
Wow.
Okay. And so I started the open source intelligence revolution, and then I morphed into the open source everything revolution. We can create a John Deere tractor today for $25,000. Instead of $250,000. So we can rebuild America at 10% of the cost of a failed Western model, which is 50% waste and 90% profit for the banks. So in many ways, it was important for me to go be a spy so that I could understand the emptiness of spying.
Well, it's been a remarkable journey for you, and I can't tell you how honored I am to have you here sharing this. I never thought I'd ever have
Scott,
engagement with you ever,
but a champion in your own right, and I respect what you do, and I think you've really run a great interview, and we're going to have to follow up here. I'm going to interview you. I'm doing a new series of truther interviews, and so Sergeant Report is next. I just did Alexander Bruce, try to get X-22, and I would like to do you too, and I'd just like you to come on and talk for 30 minutes about what it's been like to grow into and be a truther.
Oh, I'm looking forward to it. I'd be incredibly honored. I'm looking forward to you sending over an email as soon as we're done. Get me all that information. I want my listeners to be able to go in there and start grabbing this information, because I think you are a hidden, a treasure trove, a gem of information that this is going to be required for our great awakening. These are things my audience hasn't heard the depths of what you shared today, and they need to understand that this information is there. It's been vetted. And now they know where to go, because everybody says, show me evidence, show me proof, show me this. And you're great at cataloging this stuff and creating a massive library of resourcing. On the other hand, I get it. I see it. It's here. I move on. I'm a one-man show. You probably are too, but I got to keep on moving. I got to fire and move. So I don't have the time to catalog all this. And you just made, you made me look good today.
Yeah, and that's the big difference between me and everybody else. I mean, when I say I wrote the first warning letter to the White House on cyber vulnerabilities, you can point to it. And you can go to phi-beta-iota.net and look up 1994 sounding the alarm, and you can see exactly what I told the White House in 1994. They ignored me. Instead, they allowed NSA to gut everything. So let me go, Scott, but I will follow up with you. And I certainly appreciate very much your invitation. You're a noted name, and I do watch you carefully.
Wow. Don't make me sit here with Cupids flying around my head shooting at me now, Robert. It's a wonderful time with you. I appreciate you. And then we'll be back at you again. God bless, my friend.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.